starting with the rock god Steven Tyler. Something's right in the world today, and everybody knows it's wrong. What I'm going to talk about here is something that I started thinking about at least in 2005. It all began at lunch one day when I showed up and was talking with my major advisor at the time, who asked me the question, what do you want to study? And my answer looked a little like this. And he sort of went, whoa, okay, I could see on his face there's a problem here, right? Exit, timeout. There are things up here, obviously, that are more recent than 2005, but this is sort of what every major advisor kind of goes through with one of their students that says, well, that's too much, right? And I thought to myself, I've been thinking to myself for all these years, which is, I don't think it's too much. I think what's needed is to see them all together. And I've been asking this question of, is there a root cause for all of these? And I think if we ask that question, we actually may have the benefit of understanding how to work with them a little bit differently. There's a different context when you see them all together rather than separately, okay? And the easy answer is greed, right? This is not some sort of sociological genius standing before you. This is a person with great hair. Just want to make sure we're all there, right? But everybody would seemingly get to this answer. And what's fascinating to me is I get that answer too, but it seems to be ignored, right? I hear words like, or phrases like political economy, and I get a little, right? It's sort of, what are you talking about here, right? Not that that's not true, but it doesn't seem to get to it. Now, let me show you what happens when you apply greed to the question, a very common question of what is social justice, okay? We have a limited view, I think, of what we mean by social justice. We have a view that sometimes stays in the realm of fairness and equity, and I think, of course, it's important. I agree with that. I would never disagree with that. But I think when we only stay there, we miss some real important points, okay? In our society, when somebody advances in the US or in Europe, when they advance, you actually become more of a, I hate to say this, but you become more of an oppressor. And you would not get that view standing in the US or standing in Europe. You would only get that view if you sort of backed out, if you reframed your frame of reference. If you looked at it globally, you kind of go, oh yeah, forgot about that part. So a fuller view of social justice, if we were really paying attention to it, would look a little more something like this, which is that when you go from having been a have-not to a have, you do that on the backs of others constantly without maybe even seeing that. And that's not to say we're bad people, but the fact that we keep missing that is really important, because in our society, to advance, right, and to now sort of apply the word greed to this a bit more, it becomes a little bit unsteady. There's something else going on here, and we need to attend to that. There's no way that we can say that social justice is attained whenever there's a system of human or environmental exploitation connected to it. That's not something that we can say is social justice. Somebody can advance in our society, yes. Somebody can have more opportunities, yes, true. But it always comes at a cost, because our society is hugely exploitive to the rest of the world. We're on that train, so we have to pay attention to the train itself. Right, this is sort of like I said, it's a frame of reference movement. This is what happened in science when you go from Newton to Einstein. You go from the Earth to the universe. And I think we need to have that frame of reference when we're talking about these things. It's not just equity for me, equity for you. It's equity for all of us. And we keep missing that all of us part. So therefore, and I'm going to say this, and you can see that, I don't think that it's okay for us to say that we have social justice in our society. I think we actually have to say it's not attainable in our society because of the impact that it then ends up having. And I think we have to kind of sit and be with that, right? That's an important paradigmatic shift. There's something out of that will really occur, I think, if we take that seriously. If you haven't figured this one out yet, you can save the world with flowcharts. Yes, you can, okay? as I was thinking about this and thinking about how if you put greed at the very beginning of this conversation, you actually start to see how things are connected. And if nothing else happens from this craziness, and I do mean, craziness, you start to see how things are connected. So here's just how I've sort of situated things together, and others might see it differently, which is absolutely 100% fair. All the way on the left is one major branch is patriarchy. So why patriarchy? Greed has been situated in sort of a global fashion with white, straight, cis men. They've been funneling the money in their direction for hundreds of years, if not longer. Okay? Not to say that other people haven't tried, they just haven't done it as well. Right? That's an important thing to understand. Where did patriarchy come from? It comes from this impetus, from this motivation to funnel the money towards white, straight, cis men. Cis, not trans, right, if you're not familiar with that term. That's key. Knock women out. Knock out people who are trans. Knock out people who are gay and lesbian, and so forth. Right? That is the idea. Knock them out so that the money comes towards me. On the left side there, you also have to be careful with this one. We know through history, religion has supported this. There's been moral codes that have supported slavery. That's not okay. You have to be on the lookout for that constantly. The middle branch, colonization. Colonization is really about taking resources and taking the people away from resources and shifting their mindset so you can take their resources. It's still a greed thing. And one of the ways, this is not the entirety, but I think it's important to understand that when we talk about racism, racism is grounded in greed, even today. It was grounded in greed then, and it's still grounded in greed today. It's about knocking people out so the money keeps coming in my direction. That doesn't mean it's the totality of racism, but it's certainly a major part of it. And I think it shifts how we think about things when we really bring it to that level. In today's world, we have shifted from plantation-style slavery to globalization slavery. It's still going on, folks, right? 12 cents an hour is no different than 0 cents an hour. I mean, let's be real. Okay? You can't justify that. And in today's world, you're going to see in a second, but all of this industrialization, which has been attached to greed as well, Karl Marx must be really happy right now, it's resulted in lots of pollution going into the atmosphere, as we all well know. So as a symptom of greed, global warming exists. And we don't see that connection. And that's crucial at this point in time. We need to see that connection, right? And I want to add this too, because this is, of course, is what we're experiencing at the moment, which is this tricking of poor and working class white men. That they see themselves somehow as different than everybody else who's suffering, and that they're going to speak out and they're going to aim their anger and energies in this sort of white nationalist fashion, as if somehow the billionaires are closer to them than they are to the people they're standing side by side with suffering in the same exact way, or close to the same exact way. That's crucial. That's hugely missed. The other part here is this thing called hegemony, and I know that's a very academic word at this point, but what does it really mean? It means that people who are being oppressed stand with that oppression. They participate in the oppression that's hurting themselves. And that's really key for us to understand, because that is us. And we have to see that. What narratives are we buying into that's keeping this whole entire structure going? What narratives and practices do we engage in that keeps the money still funneled towards the people who already have the money? That's what that's about right there. Going back to the oligarchs, if the peasantry didn't stand in sort of a docile, controlled manner, there would be no royalty. There would be no kings or queens. But they believed, because they were told to believe, and they told each other to believe, that the kings and queens were divine. That's hegemony, right? What narratives do we have today? And of course, there's a long discussion about that. But that's key. There's this political collusion piece, and there's a power piece, right? That is key as well. Governance is designed with that funneling in mind. And it's, like I said before, it's had this impact. It's had this filling up of the atmosphere with this toxin that we know has trouble. So there's big greed, there's little greed, and we have to see our part in it. There is no path to sustainability if we don't work with this greed piece. And just to take a note from Martin Luther King, those who love peace must learn to organize as effectively as those who love war. That's what we're talking about today. You can take the words peace and war and put in different, right? But that's what we're doing right now. So we have to see, what is it that we can actually do? What's the path forward look like? Well, I'm starting with the word solidarity here. And by solidarity, what I mean is equal membership. Whether I give it to you or not, I'm acting with that in mind. I don't have to give it to you. If I do give it to you, I have the power. There is nobody in power when there's true solidarity going on. So starting with that in mind, because when I show people the first flow chart, they say, well, okay, what's the positive stuff, right? Well, yeah, what's the positive stuff? Come on. So solidarity, so it's broken down into three ways just as well. The left, look, nothing's ever perfect on a planet, but feminism has been on point since the 1700s. Give it the program, people, right? It's not been perfect, and there's a lot of arguing internally, so I'm just saying. So this has been about affirming and having full inclusion of people. The middle column here, decolonization, well, that just makes sense. That was an easy one. That was a gimme. But what we're really working towards is localization and globalization, and the globalization with sort of a responsibility behind it. What does it look like to be globally responsible? But localization provides more prosperity, by the way, right? When you concentrate business as has been done on our planet, you create more poverty. The opposite of hegemony, empowerment, right? And so there's a lot of things here that we can start to work with. And in schools, one of the biggest ones is greatest contribution. What can our kids, and we've been talking about this tonight, but what is it that exists in our kids that they can contribute in a very valuable way? Instead of teaching towards making them docile workers for somebody else, how about making them the people who they want to become? We have this issue here of a strong democracy, people being involved on a daily basis, being active in creating. And we have this other one, and I think this is really important, this critique of power, this expectation that power is going to be critiqued always. If I say something that's dumb, you should be like, that's dumb. And I should be like, oh yeah, that's dumb. There's no defensiveness here. Like, bring it on. Let's talk about that. That's what we mean by solidarity, right? What do you mean by that's dumb? Well, I mean it's dumb. Okay, good. Yeah, you're right. That was dumb. That was dumb. I'll give you that, right? Now, long-term sustainability, long-term integrated sustainability, I think, is achievable when the social justices pieces are present, right? You can't just go carbon negative and sequester carbon and call it a day. That's not long-term. So, sustainability needs social justice, right? Where do we go from here? Full stop, but we're going to keep going. And this is just me running through it from the frame of thinking that I do, which is teaching, right? So this is just from a way of thinking. What do we need to do? One, we have to think of ourselves as fully conscious human beings or something that we can actually achieve in terms of creating full consciousness. We should not be this hot or not consciousness. We really are full bodies consciousness. And there's a lot to be said here, but we have to start with what do we mean by being human and fully conscious? Two, we really do have to understand what we mean by sustainability. It is not just the environment, folks, right? It is environment, social culture, and economic, and they're working simultaneously together. Three, convergent thinking is not helping us. That's not where we should be in schools. We should be supporting divergent thinking. There's times when you have to converge on something, but you don't end there. Divergent thinking is we have to divergently think if we're going to fix the things that we're breaking, right? Creating consciousness of sustainability, how we get there, what it looks like. And, there's a map here. It's confusing. There's a lot of stuff here. But the point is that there are ways to move forward. And so when somebody asks you this question of what do you want to study, here's the right answer. Think bigger, right? Thank you.